Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. And basically what I'm doing in this live stream is talk about destructuring, one of my favorite JavaScript features. Hands down one of my favorite features because it just helps make your code cleaner. So before we actually do destructuring, the best thing to do is actually see what life looks like without destructuring. So first I'm going to create an object. So we'll say const object. Okay. And that object is going to be equal an object with properties of name, which will be Alex Merced, and another property age 34. Okie dokie. So cool. So now first let's take a look at how I would break apart this object without destructuring. So without destructuring. So what I would have to do is I'd have to create a new variable called name, and then I have to say it equals my obj.name. And then I'd have to create a new variable called age, and I would have to say, hey, that equals my obj.age. And then I'd be able to console log both properties. This is how I would do this without destructuring. So, and the idea here is we're trying to pull out the information in the object into separate variables. So that way it's not just all bundled in the object. So console.log name age. So this is without destructuring. Save. Okay. So now if I do that and I run this, so let's see here, node testing.js. See, I get Alex Merced 34 because we have this object. We pull out the name property, and then we pull out the age property, and then we console log both properties. So this is without destructuring. Okay. Now destructuring will make this even simpler. So let me comment this out. So now I'm going to figure out a better way to pull out these properties from this object without having to do all that stuff. With destructuring. Okay. How would I do it? Instead of creating 2 lines of code for each variable, I could just do this. I create a curly bracket. This signals that, hey, I'm destructuring an object. And these are the variable names. And I would just put name, age. Then I would say equals, and then the object that I'm destructuring, my obj. So what this does is that it says, oh, there must be a name property in my obj. Let me go pull that name property and store it in this variable called name. And then it does the same thing with age. Now I can do console.log name age, and I should get the same result. Okay, node. See, I get the same result. Okay, name and age are now their own separate variable. And this is nice because it's typing name is a lot easier than typing my obj.name all the time. Typing age is easier than typing my obj.age all the time. So it allows you to take an object you know you're getting and make life easier. Okay, especially useful in functions where you pass in an object to destructure. And actually, I'll come back to that. But now let's say I wanted to also bring in a value. Okay, a value called a height. Okay. And the thing is that there is no value called height in the object. I could specify a default value. So I could say, hey, destructure height. But if there is no height, make it equal, we'll say 5.10. I'm 5'10", but this works. Okay. So now I should be able to still console log height, but because my obj doesn't have a height property, it will then resort to the default. Okay, no testing. And see, there you go. You get the default. Now, what happens if maybe I already destructured a separate object, or I have a separate variable that's already called age? So this would collide with that variable. So what I can do is I can do this. I can be like age, Alex age. And what this does, it says we're looking for the age property, but don't store it in a variable called age. Store it in a variable called Alex age. So now when I put an Alex age here, okay, it'll create a variable called Alex that will work. Okay, so see, it still does the same thing. So that's the cool thing about the syntax. You have the ability to set up defaults. You have the ability to rename the properties once you've pulled them out. These are all really, really cool things to do. Okay, and one last thing we could do. So let me actually add a height property here. Height, and the height's going to equal 5 point. Oh, let's do the string. 5, 10. Okay. Now let's say I only wanted to destructure the name. I only want name, but I want the other two properties to still be in a separate object. So I can actually use the rest operator, which is 3 dots, and then give a variable name. I will just say the rest because it's pretty descriptive. It's the rest of the properties. So what this is doing is that when I do this syntax right here, again, the curly brackets here on this side, it looks at this object here and says, okay, you want to destructure a property called name. Is there a name property in the object? Yes, there is. So we're going to store Alex Merced in that variable called name. But now that I'm using the rest operator, it says, huh, you want the remaining properties in this variable called the rest. So it does, it says, okay, there's age and there's height. Those are the remaining properties. So we're going to store those in the rest. Okay, so let's see here. Now let's do the rest. Okay, save. Okay, and now watch what happens. So we should get a console log where we get the name, Alex Merced, and then the other two properties will be in a separate object. That's this variable, but we don't need the 3 dots there. The 3 dots are not needed. There we go. 3 dots are only needed when you're destructuring. Because I'm saying take out name, put the rest in this object. Okay. And again, if you have questions along the way, feel free to leave a comment. I will be able to see it. And let's see here. Let's actually run this code. And there you go. You see. There it took out Alex Merced, but then the remaining properties are in this object. So you can do a lot of cool stuff with destructuring an object. Now, let's say, let's just delete all this. Let's say I'm creating a function that takes in this object. Okay, and I always know that the object I'm planning on taking in is always going to have a name, an age, and a height. Okay, so I could do this. Const myfunc equals obj, so being an object. And I always want to do, first thing I want to do, instead of having to type in obj.name, obj.age every single time, I'm just going to destructure those from whatever gets passed into my function. So const. But, you know, there's a possibility that someone tries to pass in an object that doesn't have those properties into my function. So I'm going to name defaults. So I'm going to just sit there and say name equals empty string, age equals 1, just in case they don't specify an age, and height equals an empty string if they don't specify. Okay, and that comes from whatever object is passed in. And then what this function does is then console.logs name, age, height. Okay, so then I'm taking advantage of destructuring. Okay, by destructuring the object right away. And then that's good. Okay. And then I can actually just run the function. Const I don't even need to do console. Just say console.log. Actually, I don't even need to do console.log. I can just do my func, my obj. Okay. And there you go, you get this. Okay. So essentially what's happening is that this object is being passed into this function. When it gets invoked on this line here, it then destructures that object and then console logs the properties. I can make this even simpler because here's the downside of doing it this way. Since I'm destructuring it in the function, the object, this object variable still exists. So it's still in memory. It's still taking up space in my memory. So if someone threw in this big object with like 100 other properties, and I'm only using 3, I now have this thing in my memory while the function runs. What I could do is actually I could move this destructuring into the parameter list. I can cut this out from here and actually put this over here. And this will do the same thing. Because basically what happens, this is just saying when someone passes in a parameter, the first parameter into this function, destructure it like so. So then just destructures the parameter and gives me name, age, and height. So this will still essentially work. This is really cool because it just helps you, saves you a couple lines of code, makes you more memory efficient, because all those other object properties don't get saved into memory because there's no variable holding them. The only variables you're creating are name, age, and height, which pulls from the object that's passed in, and those are the only variables you're storing into memory while this function runs. So not only does it make your code more clean, but it also makes your code more well managed memory-wise. So this is pretty cool. Okay, so that's a pretty heavy dollop of object destructuring. And you could also just destructure stuff that comes out. So like if this function were to return an object, you could destructure that object. So I have a lot of videos on destructuring. So if you just Google Alex Merced destructuring, you'll find plenty of videos where I go through all sorts of really fun stuff you can do. But I mean, this just kind of illustrates the point. You can do this all with arrays too. So let's show you how you do it with arrays. So let's say we have an array. My array equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we've already done object destructuring. Now we're going to do array destructuring. So we have an array. Okay, now if I wanted to sit there and separate all these values out, so first let's just do it without destructuring, so you can see what would be the long way to do this. Okay, I'd have to be like const1 equals my R0. Const2 equals my R1. And see, this would take forever. Okay, this is not a very pleasant way of doing things. Okay, and then I would console.log 1 and 2, and then this should work. I should get 1 and 2 in my console. 1 and 2. Okay, that's not fun. There's got to be a better way of doing this. So let me just comment this out. Then there's with destructuring, I can destructure the array. Slightly different syntax, but same premise. You're breaking it down. Okay. And really, it's not so much as array and object destructuring. There's object destructuring, and then there's this syntax, which could technically, it's really, you're destructuring iterables. So you could technically use this with any iterable object in JavaScript. If you don't know what an iterable object means, it's generally any data structure that has a iterator built into it, which gets into this complex stuff about iterators and next and the next function and generators and the symbol. It's a thing you can do. Okay, you can actually create objects that have a built-in pattern in which they iterate. So you can use for loops over them. So if you can use a for of loop, you can use array destructuring on the thing. So this means this should work with maps. This should work with sets and other iterable items. Okay. So just a side note. Okay, but how does it work when I'm doing this kind of destructuring? I do const, except this time instead of using curly brackets, I use square brackets. And what this means is that instead of looking for property matches, so before I put name and I look for a property called name, here it's just in the order of. So the first thing in the array will be assigned to the variable 1. The second thing will be assigned to the variable 2. Now I don't want to put any other variables, so I can put the rest of them. Okay, well, let's say I want to skip 3. So I can skip 3, put another comma. That'll skip 3, and then I can put the rest in a variable called the rest. So again, using the rest operator, 3 dots, to collect the rest of the things. So now, if I were to console log this, and actually I have to again equals my array. So what it does, it takes this, gives it instructions on how to break down this array. So it says take the first thing in the array, store it in 1, take the second thing in the array, store it in 2, skip the third thing, store the rest of them in the rest. That's essentially what that's saying. All on one line. Very nice. So now if I console log 1, 2, and the rest, let's see what we get. See, 1, 2, we skip 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this pretty much goes everything else that we talked about as far as like setting up defaults, you can do here. Okay, so I could have sit there and say, hey, you know what, if there wasn't another item, you could, so if there wasn't, let's say there was only one item in the array, I could change this and sit there and say, hey, 2 equals 2 in case there wasn't one. So you can do all that same stuff. You could destructure the parameter of a function in the same way you could do it with object destructuring. So all that still applies. So yeah, that's destructuring. You just, one can be very memory efficient, especially when you're using it in functions. It makes your code cleaner because you're breaking down a lot of stuff into nicer looking variables, but you're still able to keep them bundled up as you pass them around your code. It's very nice. It's very a nice tool to make a lot of stuff a little bit easier on typing. Where you end up using this a lot, especially when you're exporting and importing things from libraries, because oftentimes when you, especially if you're like a node and you do like a require, what that really is importing an object. So you can just destructure that object as you bring it in. There are other instances like that, but bottom line is like when it comes to importing and exporting, destructuring can be really nice at keeping your code looking clean and making those import statements look nice. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. You guys have a great day and enjoy.